On June 24, Russia was on edge as mutinous mercenaries from the Wagner Group rolled toward Moscow in armored trucks as the rest of the world watched in awe. The fighters, numbering in the thousands, had turned against the Russian high command and had easily conquered Rostov, a significant city in the country's southwest, before advancing swiftly toward the capital. They were led by Wagner leader and catering millionaire Yevgeny Prigozhin. President Vladimir Putin dubbed the rebels traitors on national television, but Prigozhin insisted his uprising was a march for justice and denied planning a military takeover. The rebels managed to fire down several military planes with seemingly no resistance. Was Putin on the verge of being overthrown by a mutiny of his own making? Would gunfights break out above Red Square? By evening, an agreement between the Kremlin and Prigozhin had been mediated by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, ending the immediate threat to Putin. The warlord reportedly consented to flee to Belarus in exile, while also directing his men to disperse. On July 6, however, Lukashenko made a new declaration. Prigozhin had returned to St. Petersburg, Russia. The fact that Prigozhin and his rebels seem to have spared punishment at least for the time being, even though the specifics of the agreement between Putin and the Wagner commander remain unknown, could come back to haunt the Russian government. The Kremlin claimed on July 10 that Putin even met Prigozhin after the mutiny. So how much has the uprising eased Putin's tight control over Russia? Can he reclaim the brutal dominance that he has exercised for more than 20 years? Or perhaps Prigozhin's uprising catalyzed the expulsion of the KGB operative? And how might a post-Putin Russia appear? According to observers, Putin's timid response and attempted rebellion have probably irreparably damaged him. Even if a violent uprising may not be imminent, early indications point to the possibility that he may lose the backing of those Russian elites who have up to now stuck by him if the insurrection succeeds. But those who might succeed Putin as leader of Russia are unlikely to present a significantly more liberal alternative. Isn't as powerful? According to historians, earlier uprisings by Russian military officers led to the system's downfall. In the latter days of World War I in 1917, General Lavrov Kornilov marched on the country's capital, St. Petersburg. The Bolsheviks overthrew the government later that year. The Soviet Union's demise in 1991 was swiftly followed by yet another coup attempt. Russia today differs greatly from what it was a century ago, or even 32 years ago. It is debatably still fragile, though. Up until recently, Putin managed to strike a careful balance between exercising control over the military, corporate moguls, intelligence agents, and other interests, while also granting them a certain amount of autonomy, much like a monarch and his lords. That equilibrium has been disturbed by Prigozhin's insurrection. Russian economist and University of Chicago professor Konstantin Sonin remarked, "The uprising has shown that Putin's hold on power is not as strong as it was widely believed." Other political players reacted to Wagner's activities and Putin's speech extremely slowly. Elites might have turned against Putin if Prigozhin had been more assertive. Since Russia invaded Ukraine last year, there has been speculation, and even some wishful thinking in the West, that parts of the Russian elite will remove Putin. Russia has been excluded from a significant portion of the world economy by the strict sanctions imposed by the West. Many Russian business people appear to be quietly dissatisfied with how much Putin's war is costing them, according to a phone discussion between two prominent businessmen that was leaked this year. Others will be apprehensive of being seen as complicit as allegations of war crimes by Russia in Ukraine increase and Putin is indicted by the International Criminal Court, ICC, in The Hague. Analysts claim that Prigozhin's rebellion is proof that players with significant clout can and will defend themselves. The fact that an armed insurrection was not put down completely, but instead reached a negotiated settlement, opens the door for other uprisings to do the same thing. According to crisis group analyst Oleg Ignatov, the elites do not yet understand what Putin is doing to prevent such a situation in the future. From their perspective, his response to the crisis appears far to be weak. Crevices in the Kremlin structure. Many local officials around Russia take statements reiterating their support for Putin soon after the putsch failed, and the president himself congratulated the army for preventing a civil war, though it's unclear what exactly it did. The data, however, exposes holes in the Kremlin's claim that Putin has the support of all of Russia's leaders. Is there a chance of another coup? Wealthy and powerful Russians do express discontent with Putin and worry about whether he can still uphold their interests. Security expert Mark Galeotti stated in The Spectator that, unlike Putin's inner circle, which largely consists of former KGB officers bitter over the fall of the Soviet Empire, the younger generation is more attached to Putinism because it was the quickest route to success. They are currently losing. Putin is attempting to portray the uprising as an exceptional incident that may be attributed to Prigozhin's personality as opposed to systemic issues, according to Ignatov. Nevertheless, he continued, this does not indicate that his dominance is under. Few people buy that premise. Ilya Met, a political scientist, noted in Riddle Russia that many still had not received personal sanctions. Additionally, there is no easy way for those who have been subject to Western sanctions to have their names removed from the blacklist, which discourages strife. The ease with which the Wagner warriors seized possession of the Rostov military headquarters would worry Putin as much as the attempted mutiny itself, according to commentators, because that could mean that Prigozhin had supporters in the army. According to the New York Times, which cited U.S. intelligence officials, at least some Russian security services were aware of the mutiny plot. The Air and Space Commander, Sergei Surovikin, has been arrested and has not been seen in public for days. Ignatov stated that it appeared that someone knew but did nothing, while someone another did not know, observe, and did nothing either. Prigozhin had several connections in the affluent world. He could talk to numerous people about his displeasure and his ambitions. I don't believe that all of the military and FSB leadership could have been in the dark. However, there were also no defections to Wagner, the largest armed organization not directly under Kremlin control at the time. Even Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, has one. However, other paramilitary units don't measure up in Galeotti's opinion. Putin doesn't face any imminent armed threat, he told Al Jazeera. The only force with anything like the kind of numbers and freedom of operation that would require our Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov's, and such is the widespread fear of the Chechens that would not get the kind of easy run to Moscow that Wagner enjoyed. The military's lack of support for Putin in a future crisis poses the actual concern, not that they will turn against him. The so-called color revolutions in other former Soviet states have been characterized by a similar rift among the elite, which allowed protesters to fend off harsh state security. But what about Putin's popularity among the general public? The silence of the people in the cities which Wagner controlled or passed through on their march to Moscow tells that there is a tacit support for Wagner's cause, claimed Sonin. Perhaps there is also discontent with Putin's leadership. Additionally, even though Putin has been in power for close to 25 years, the conflict in Ukraine and Russia's troubles, there may be the turning point for many individuals who previously supported him. A strong, charismatic, and authoritarian leader who can end the conflict and restore Russian citizens' belief in their army and nation is needed, according to Ignatov. Putin is currently unable to meet this demand, and it will become an increasing problem for him. A Russia after Putin. Russians' sense of security under Putin has been shaken by the rise in the frequency of Ukrainian cross-border incursions, particularly those by far-right Russian militias fighting for Kyiv. Putin established his reputation for bringing back law and order after the chaotic 1990s. What would happen if the Russian army was thoroughly routed on the battlefield, given that his followers consider the conflict in Ukraine as existential? If it becomes clear that Putin won't be given a way out of the war by signing some sort of new Minsk agreement, if the Ukrainian army closes in on Crimea and can effectively put it under siege, warned Jokic, it may have grave repercussions for Russia's political stability. Did you like it? Tell us what you think of the video in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting videos.